In the department meeting, we talked a little bit about Desmos activities, and so I wanted to show you a little bit about how to find those activities. So whatever you might be working on in your class, so my class just was working on graphing secant or something, and then you put down site, and then teacher.desmos.com. You could just type in something like graph secant Desmos, but you'll get Desmos graphs along with activities. If you do this site colon and then put teacher.desmos.com and some quotation marks, it'll only search the teacher Desmos whatever it's called website. So you can see here there's a handful of activities already here. So if I wanted to, I can open up some of these. I'm just opening them in new tabs. A nice little intro to limits. And then I can go through and look at these. So this is what it looks like on the back end when you're first looking at somebody else's activity. You have all sorts of options. The thing you'll want to do at first is just go through the student preview. So you'll see here, use row 3 to graph the tangent function. So this person wants me to write tan of x, apparently. And then it talks about recalling the quotient identity. And then it says now try graphing both sine and cosine in row 6 to compare their behavior to that of the tangent. So let's do sine of x. And I guess we do another one, y is equal to cosine of x. Okay, cool. So we're supposed to recognize things like the 0 of, and I'd probably want these to be different colors, though students wouldn't know how to do that. The graph of sine, right, or cosine, we can see whenever it is 0, we hit our asymptotes, and then the red graph and the blue graph have the same 0. So what does she ask students to do next? She says, okay, how did this identity help you determine the exact location of the asymptotes? Where are they located? And then, why is there asymptotes, blah, blah, blah. And so she has all these different questions. And maybe I like this, maybe I don't. Maybe I think this is a lot of work on this side for them to play in the graphing piece. It really, if I like it, I can use it. If I don't need to. I can look at a different one and see what somebody else has done in terms of their graph of secant. That was a graph of tangent. I Googled, because it's everything. So this one, let's see. Starts with sine, zoom in, determine domain and range, y-intercept, zeros, domain and range, okay. So maybe this is more my style. The students aren't having to write as much stuff in the graph, and they're just sort of making some observations. I still think this could be better. So maybe I like this activity, but I want more to do with it. I want to edit it. So this is what was asked at the department meeting. Olga said, how could you edit this? Well, first, there's a couple of things. I just clicked on these to see the student preview. If I click on assign, I can actually go ahead and just right then assign it to a class. I can get a single session code, or I can make classes so that all of the things I've assigned to those classes is available. Some people, if they've made this activity for others, will have a teacher guide, and you'll even see that on some of the screens. They'll have a teacher section, which tells you like what you should be doing as a teacher, the ways you can facilitate conversations. This one doesn't look like she has done that. But you have lots of options here. One is plus. If you want to, you can organize stuff into collections. So I have collections of stats, calc, pre-calc, trig, and then stuff for the computational layer. But if you wanted to edit it, so looking at this woman's activity, I want the graph and the question to be on the same screen. Like, I think it's going to be hard for students to keep these two things separate. So what I might want to do is, she has this as an entire graphing calculator screen, which I don't even think is supported anymore. But I could, on this same thing, what is the domain and range of this? I could add a graph to this screen. I'm just going to click graph. And then I could put on this graph, y is equal to sine of x. And I could even change the zoom of this. Maybe it doesn't, we don't need to go that big. Let's go -3 to 3. And -10 to 10 is fine. So now I have a graph of sine on the same slide as this thing telling them to enter a answer. I could even give them a note if I wanted to. Instead of having it in the title, I could have said, please give the domain and range in, the box below. Another thing that this woman doesn't have in her particular activity is she has not clicked the have students share their answers. So if you wanted to have students be able to see another student's answer, you could click this. This is an easy way to, while Desmos is kind of an individual activity, most of the way it's set up, even if you put them into breakout rooms, a way to have students be able to see each other's thinking. You could even add a screen. So let's say I go, well, you know what, I want them to respond to somebody else. I could have another screen where I say, look at someone else's answer for the last slide. Does it match yours? Right. If not, do you? Just something like that. And then I could add another text input. And maybe this one I don't want them to share with their classmates because I don't want them to be like seeing each other's back and forth here. One of the things I can do when I'm actually having students work through this activity, so let's say I'm happy now with this activity. Those two edits were all I needed. Or maybe I decide, oh, I'm not going to get to tangent today. Let's see, she probably gets all the way to secant because I went that far. Maybe I decide I don't want to do cosecant and secant at this point in my class. That's as easy as just coming in here and saying, oh, let me delete this graph. Like, I'm not going to do any of the inverse functions yet. Let me delete these screens. Like, I'm glad that she has them in here, but that's a whole lot for one activity, and we've got a lot going on already. So I'm going to get rid of all of the inverse functions. So now I'm feeling better about this. I could rename it. And save. And I'll press publish. So now I have my own version of this activity, which shows up in my custom section. You can see it has her name and it says edited by me. And all of those edits that I put in there are now there. Now there's a graph on the same slide as them writing domain and range instead of them having to go back to the first slide to see domain and range. Hers is nice that she has this with all the pies down at the bottom. Ooh, look how she did that. Now I know that I can just go in and I can put pi over 2 as a step, and Desmos is classy enough to put all the different cuts at pies. Ooh, I like that. Not something I knew that I could do. So I could go back in if I wanted to, and I could edit the slides so that these have all of those different multiples of pi over 2 as opposed to stepping by 1, which doesn't make sense. So that's just an easy way to edit. I can add stuff, I can delete slides, I can add slides. One of the cool things here in terms of Desmos, they have a lot of starter screens, the screens for checking in and screens for understanding. So if you have something, let me open back up that custom activity we were working on. Oh, I want one of my own. There it is. So let's say I want to play with this. I want to add a slide at the beginning to check in with my students. And so Desmos has screens for checking in. So I can open this up. There's a whole starter screens. Oops. Let me come here. Let me edit it. That's what I need to do. Copy and edit. It's annoying because then you have a bunch of custom things in there. But let's say, you know, this is a little hokey, this robot thing. I don't want to have the robot. But I do like a little energetic, positive, negative, tired. That's a nice check-in. Or perhaps I decide I could put a statement in. Energy level 2 weeks ago versus today. That's nice. Okay, maybe I like this slide. So I'm just going to just make sure this slide is highlighted here. I'm going to copy it with a Control-C. And then when I come back to this activity that I was working on, let me edit it again. Now I can come in here and I can just do a Control-V. And it puts in that slide from that Desmos activity, which is just checking in on how my students are feeling. I can even go back, and maybe I don't want a starter screen. Maybe I want a screen to see how they thought, what they thought about the activity. Those are there in that same set that oof. Let me go back. Yes, I added that, but this one is off. I can go ahead and go back to that starter screens, and I'll go to the checking for understanding. And so this is one that's like an after instead of the starter screens. And so I could grab one of these. This one is, how did this feel? Was it interesting? Was it confusing? You can obviously customize and change the labels. Do things make sense more? Or are they, so they can elaborate and they can tell you what's going on. Any questions about today's lesson? How well did you understand the math? How did you feel about learning today? So there's lots of great wrap-up screens that you could add, so we could make this even stronger by throwing one of these at the very end if we wanted to on this activity. So that's some basic editing. You can grab some other slides from other activities. You just have to have 2 activity builders open at once, which is kind of annoying, but you can Control-C and Control-V between them. And then you can easily edit what's there. You can add a screen with the little plus button. You can add your own text. You can go in and edit the words. The only time that you're going to get in trouble, I'll show you the activity I was going to change up for Juan. This is an activity I did with my students in one of my AP Calc class. Right now I have it set to anonymous mode, so you can't see their names. They won't be able to see each other's names either when they do share with class. This activity is a beautiful limit and continuity question activity. And the one thing that got me when I was using it in class is I looked through the slides and went, oh, I love all these slides. They're beautiful. And then the very last one is an actual graph about the person who made this instead of me. And so I was like, oh, oops, I should have edited that. If I had gone all the way to slide 21 and seen that, that would have been a good thing to edit. So I actually had locked them in, so they had to be on these 2 screens at that moment. They were working on continuity. But if I wanted to go in and change those, because I want to give this activity specifically to Juan, so he can try it out in his class, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that, copy and edit. But I do want you to see where things get a little bit messy. You see, anytime somebody has named their graphs and named their input, that typically means they're going to use the computational layer later on. So you could actually see there's this little green thing here. This means there's some actual coding going on behind the scenes in this. So you don't necessarily want to play with any Desmos activity that has that little green thing happening, because if you make too many edits, you might break some of the actual code that's going on behind the scenes. You can, of course, play with that code yourself. It's not that difficult. There's a lot of people that are very helpful about it on Facebook, on Twitter, but it is a challenge. But if I just want to go in here and change this, I'm just going to go find that thing that says Mr. Spinelli, and I'm going to say Mr. Bernal. I'm just making it silly. Has nice eyebrows. And then Mr. Bernal. So there we have it now, something a little bit more fun, right? So it's about Juan, and they have that I got this or I need help done. And then I'm going to have to edit this graph as well. But this is one where he's just bringing forward the dots from everybody else's. So he's actually doing in his script, he's graphing everybody else's dots here. And so I'm going to go ahead and again change this. But again, I'm avoiding all the parts that are computational, so I'm okay to play with this. But that's just what you want to look for. He's going to be sad if they say meh. They won't. But yes, so now this is good and pretty, and everything in this is perfect for Juan. And let me just edit it so that it says Mr. Bernal. And then I can publish it. And so now I have this activity without Mr. Spinelli's name and now with Mr. Bernal's name. So that's another edit you can make. In fact, I used an activity yesterday or on Monday in my trig class, and it was all about graph transformations of sine and cosine. And I didn't like that she didn't have the original graphs of sine and cosine on the actual graph, so I just added those. But you have lots of ability to edit stuff that you can play with in Desmos. And no, you can't break it. Like, that's the nice thing. If you choose copy and edit, you're making a brand new copy. And so if you break something, the old version is still, like, the version that existed originally is still there, and you can go back and just be like, I'm going to use the existing version. So play around and break something.